here in the old city of Jerusalem. So happy to be able to do this for the world because when it came to the coronavirus, the COVID-19, I think they call it. When in Israel we call it Corona, but when that happened, all bets were off, and I only recorded maybe 30 more classes, but now I'm committed to keep it going. And we're going to be taking sponsors. These classes reach the thousands eventually, and if you'd like to have your business mentioned here, so by all means, be in touch with us. And I'm also open to birthday announcements or happy whatevers or yahrzeit mentions, but
Torah time mentioned
refuah shalemas, and also obviously a big thanks to Torah Time for putting these videos up and bringing them to you. And please subscribe to my channel, Rabbi Yom Tov, and subscribe to that and hit the bell so you get notified when I got a class coming.
They said today's shiur is dedicated to, and it says, Chaim David Yeheskel Reuven ben Dvoro.
Yeah, Chaim David Yeheskel Reuven ben Dvora, who's a dear student of mine. Should have a refuah shalem. Anyway, let's go. So today we're going to discuss something that's so important, and please God, I'll be able to free your mind. And that is, how do you know when you're right? Being right in general. It's a major topic in human experience, human psychology. There's even a dissonance that happens inside our hearts when we know we're wrong. And we're not discussing wrong and right now. There's obviously a cognitive dissonance when you're doing the wrong thing. It's like, meaning going against your own morality. That's not what we're discussing right now. We're talking about how do you know you're on the right path? And it's also or if you're in a discussion with somebody, how do you know you're right? If they're giving an opposing opinion, like, how do you know you're right? And the other thing is that it's very hard. We've been discussing motivation a bit the last few days, and Torah gives the secret, Judaism gives the secret of motivation, and that is that the word for desire is the word run. Rotzeh, ratzon, and ratz is to run. You only run for something when you really want it. But you may notice that a lot of people aren't running, and the reason they're not running is because, think about it, the faster you go in the wrong direction, the further away you are from where you want to be. So you slow down. If you're driving down the highway, and it's one of these like New Jersey 45-mile-per-hour highways, and there's blocks you're passing. And you've been carefully looking for a street, but you took your eyes off the streets for like 20 seconds, so you passed like 3 blocks. Are you still, and you're breaking the speed limit, let's just say you're going 60 and a 45. Are you still going 60 if you pass 3 streets without looking at the signs? And you may go another mile, but you're not going to be going 60 because your psychology says maybe it's back there. And how many people are driving 30, 45, meaning in their life they're not really moving forward because what if what I wanted was back there? And you'll notice it also in businesses where they're afraid to cut their losses. They should be closing the business, but they put so much into it. But yet if you go into that business, you'll see that it's lost its energy. It's lost its mojo. You can see everyone in the business is no longer, they're no longer motivated, they're no longer on fire. And you can see it's like affecting the way they're doing business. Because they know that this thing it's a foregone conclusion that this business must conclude. But no one's willing to conclude it because so much was put into it. And that's the key to success in growing businesses, is to cut your losses. When you realize there's no way out of it, that's where you break out. And whatever you lose, you lose. But it's better than losing everything. So how do you know when you're right? I'd like to start with arguments. When you're in an argument with someone and you're both trying to be right, and this happens a lot in a marriage, where you think you're right and your spouse thinks that they're right, and you, in that moment, feel the love get sucked out of the room. And it's a very interesting thing to just have love sucked out like that. And it's not just then, you could be at a Shabbos table where the host is in this like being right mode. Okay, you don't find that too much at Hasidic tables, but there's other tables out there where the host might go into some kind of being right mode about X, Y, and Z. And if you're his guest at his table, with every successive minute you sit there, you're becoming more and more, or feeling less and less love, less and less like being there. Marking that evening or that day in your heart as, don't come back to this place. This is not a safe place to be. When we're in those kind of conversations and we're feeling dominated, meaning when love is being taken out, well, why is it such a big impact on us? Why do we no, we never want to go back there? And the reason is because our deepest need is love. That is our deepest need, beyond anything else. And isn't it interesting how people are so willing to give up their deepest need just to be right? I had this issue a lot in my years in outreach in Asia Torah, back when we'd get, a busload of 50 secular kids. Did I say a busload? How about busloads of 50 secular kids? Multiple busloads, and we're in charge of them for the next 6 weeks. So there was a major issue. What was the issue? We're teaching Torah as if it's true. We're teaching God as if he exists, because that's our position. They were coming in as if God doesn't exist, and he may or may not, but certainly isn't for sure. And then there were many who said he doesn't. And then there was Judaism is, it's like legends. It's mythology. It's like the Torah is not actually God-given. Now, what would happen is I'm teaching a class, and I start to notice, and I developed a love meter, or you could call it a warmth meter, because the only way for them to hear anything I'm saying, I have to be very warm, I have to be very connected. So I'm being warm, I'm being connected, I'm making sure the stories and examples are all like right on their level. I have a lot of street credit, and it's interesting how some people have permanent street credit, because at this point in my life, I should have no street credit, but yet every time I'm given 18-year-old kids, 16, 20-year-old kids. I prefer 18 and over, but 16-year-old kids. Every time I'm given them, I have instant street credit with them before I even open my mouth. Like, I don't even have to say anything cool, It just comes, which is very interesting, that street credit. I believe it's a vibrational reality that you develop, and since every human being has a vibrational receiver and emitter. We emit vibration and we receive vibration. That you can achieve a level of vibrational cleanliness that whomever you speak to, it just goes right in. Anyway, back to our topic is I have a warmth meter or a love meter, and what would happen is I notice the room's getting cold. Why? Because the group's getting scared. And what are they getting scared about? They're getting scared that the very underpinnings of their philosophical life, because human beings are philosophical beings, and for our lifestyle, we all have to have a philosophy that underpins lifestyle. But what's happening is I am literally unpinning their philosophical tenets that are what give them the ability to maintain their lifestyle. And I feel they're getting scared. It's getting cold. There's no more love in the room. And so, let's say the topic was about, how do we know there's a God? Not how do we believe, how do we know there's a God? That was the topic. And I'm discussing how the world can't come out of nothing or whatever, but they're starting to realize the whole first cause proof, the famous first cause proof. They're starting to realize, oh my gosh, there's a God, and then you just feel it getting cold and the love meter's going down. At which point, I completely change the subject. And I tell a story about a very vulnerable experience I had that, really put me and my heart and my whole emotional system at risk when I was a child. And it was a scary time. And as I talk about that, you feel the love meter go up, and the love's coming back, and the warmth's coming back, and then till they're just it's almost like they want to jump out of the audience and hold me, because I'm discussing me as a little kid. It's almost like they want to jump out of the audience and hold me. And the second that love meter goes back to full, when it hits full, I immediately shift gears and say, what do you think the world created itself? And they're like, oh, back to that subject. Okay, we're back to that subject. And then I just go on that subject. I'm giving a very strong example, but I'm doing this in every single conversation, especially if I know they're holding an opposing view. I'm not doing this to manipulate them, by the way. I'm not doing this to manipulate them. I actually would love an argument against me. I also have a lifestyle. It also has underpinnings of philosophy. It's got a worldview. So if my worldview is skewed, fix it. And please fix me. I'm looking for that. But I'm not looking for, defensiveness not based in real logic. You understand? Which is, obviously most people aren't going to raise their hand to get defensive with a non-logical reason behind it. So they just sit there and get hammered by me. But as I'm hammering, the love meter's going down. Now, if I come out right about God, if I come out right about Torah, if I'm right, what's that make them? What are they? They're wrong. Does that make them winners or losers? Losers. And then they left the door and they may never come back. So there's a whole other thing that's necessary in communication of right and wrong, meaning who's right, who's wrong. And that is, you have to also shift the discussion to how they win. You understand? You have to shift the discussion how this is a win. Well, how would you shift the discussion for it to be a win? Well, you'll notice that anytime I would be talking to one of those crowds, I'm sure there's YouTube videos of this, that I will suddenly digress for 10 minutes on how, let's say, we were discussing the example that how God's creating the world from nothing. I will immediately do a 10-minute thing on how your life goes turbo electric color, freak out, electric, the whole world turns into Disneyland, full-time, 24/7 Disneyland. When you realize that you're being created now, out of absolute nothing, now into existence from absolute nothing. And I can prove how that works exactly. I can prove how you come into existence from absolute nothingness. So I might give that proof, but then 10 minutes on how awesome life is. So what happens is I watch the group, and the group starts getting high. They start moving into a high place. So let me just put it very simply, is that when you're being right and you feel the listener's going to be benefiting from you being right, make sure to express the benefit. You know, in other words, you want me to be right. You get that? Michael, you want, if we were having this discussion, you want me to be right about this. But they don't, because they want me to be wrong and they want to be right. But if I can show them the benefit of being right about it, so then they're much more interested in it. And this can go for anything. Like, this could be anything. It could be a discussion about an ice bath. You know, using ice baths. And this person is deathly scared of cold. Hates winter. Never had a cold shower. Never touched a cold mikveh. And I'm explaining the benefits I'm saying go into the cold, do cold showers, especially in winter, because then it's really cold, so you really get the benefits. Like, winter's the best time for cold showers. I focus much more on my cold showers in the winter than summer, when the water's not that cold. But I will definitely speak about the benefits while doing that, so that not only am I right in the end about the cold shower, but they feel like winners in the end. I didn't create losers. I created winners. Now let's talk about your path in life. Now before we do that, we're going to talk about life decisions. So we spoke about arguments, now we're going to speak about life decisions, and then we're going to talk about life path. Okay? So, making decisions, like, how do you know you're making the right decision about anything you're doing? So, one way of clarifying what's a good decision about what you're doing is which one will cause you to have a more meaningful life. So, anyone got an idea of two decisions? One's less meaningful, one's more meaningful? I can give you a couple right off. I can watch more YouTube videos, which I'm learning, developing. I'm learning on YouTube, but maybe it's enough already for this hour. Or I can go pay a bill. Okay, so I'm growing. I'm at YouTube. I'm learning from Dr. whomever, Andrew Huberman, the neurologist, and whatever that guy is. I don't know. I think he's neurology and eyes. He's his PhD. He has 2 PhDs. And so I can listen to another half hour of that, or I can go pay a bill. So what do I do? Which one do I do? So what was the question? What do I have to ask? Which one's going to bring me more meaning? So now here's a great hint for when deciding between 2 things is the one that is a fulfillment of responsibility is usually the right one, or the one that's harder is usually the right one that will bring you more meaning. So for example, let's say 2 of you asked me to do you a favor, and one of those favors is harder. I know I'm going to want to do the easier one, just knowing myself, but I also know that the one that's going to be harder is going to bring me more meaning. Is that clear? Just turn the temperature a little bit more up. Freezing there. How do we do this? I guess like that. So the harder one will bring me more joy. And this in general, like this hard work that we do is an energizer, which is really weird because when the hard work comes, what are we thinking? We're thinking that this is gonna wipe me out. But for some reason, every time you do it, I mean, you may be physically wiped out, but you just feel great. You just feel great. Your energy level is much higher because you're active and you did what you had to do. So there's harder, there's responsibility. What's more responsible? Learning more about your nervous system or paying a bill?
Paying a bill.
Yeah, paying a bill is more responsible. And you will somehow wind up feeling better about yourself and having more meaning in your life as being the guy who's responsible. You'll have more meaning in life by taking care of your logistics. And so you got that decision. Again, two things equal. If they're equal, go with the harder one. And I actually learned that from my father-in-law. And he says, you know, Yom Tov, whenever I'm in a situation where I can't decide what to do, I've trained myself over the years, always do the harder one. It'll bring you much more pleasure. And that was a lesson I got from my father-in-law. So that helps a lot with decisions. Another thing, ask someone. A smart person makes his own mistakes. No, smart person learns from, does a smart person learn from his mistakes? What's the answer?
Yeah.
No, a smart person learns from other people's mistakes. Before you do anything, just ask. I ask and ask and ask and ask to a ridiculous level. But depending on the weight of the decision, I'll ask more. Like for example, when I was getting married, meaning when I was thinking of getting engaged to my wife, I asked so many people. I mean, it was crazy because it's the second biggest, most important decision of your life. Like the second most important decision. So I just I thought of like, who are the 10 wisest people I can think of who've got high level emotional intelligence, because it was immersed, it's a relationship. And so I just went from person to person to person. And actually 10 out of 10 said to do it. Which means I probably should have stopped at the first one or second one, but I'm like an ask freak. I make basically very few decisions once they start getting important. If it's like dinner or a movie, I'm not good at movies, but if it's like, you know, milk lids or flakes, or it's like we go to that park or we go to that park to play frisbee, I have no problem making that decision. My general schedule throughout the day, but the second I'm at a decision that's going to be much more consequential, I never make that decision alone, and I often ask multiple people. Now, you do have to be a little careful, because if you ask a lot of people and you're getting conflicting answers, start slowing down with how many people you ask, because you're just going to get totally confused. Yeah?
Somebody wanted
Higher volume on the YouTube? No problem. You got to be a little careful with asking a lot of advice, but just because you might get a lot of conflicting answers and wind up even more confused than you should be. But I personally ask a lot of people and continue to ask a lot of people. I basically don't make any important decision on my own. And the funny thing about that is that if you're watching me right now, if you're listening to me right now, it's because you actually think I have something to say. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't be listening. So the reason you're listening right now is because you believe I have something worth saying. But think about it, the person you came to hear is the one who is the biggest beginner. I'm the one who's asking the most. That should be enough of a hint to let you know that if you let's say you ever dreamed of being someone that people consider you worth listening to. Well, the way you become the person worth listening to is by asking and asking, and never stop. Never stop. Just keep asking which way to go. and you'll get great wisdom, you'll get great advice, and you will, in the end, when over the years, people are going to be asking you, and your opinion will weigh in big time. But how do you become someone whose opinion weighs in? By asking. You be the guy who's a true beginner. I just want to mention, in case anyone's watching this from the Hasidic or Litvish community, the Black Hat Haredi community, in case anyone's listening from that community and you're a young man, I'm warning you that when you hit the real world, meaning the world of having to make money and stuff like that, so you got to interact with a lot of people who went to regular high schools and they got a secular education. And many of those people even went on to get first degrees in university. Many went on for masters. And sometimes you're dealing with people who have PhDs, like lawyers. And what can happen is, because your background was Torah all the years, and notice I didn't say only Torah. I could have said only Torah with no secular. No, Torah is when you study Torah, especially if you go through the whole Shas in detail, it's like getting 30 PhDs. It's like having 30 PhDs and getting no cover for it, which is good because you stay humble. But most people aren't studying that much of Shas in detail, and many people aren't studying much at all. And anyway, but what happens is you come out uneducated. Now, how do I make sure no one knows I'm uneducated? Well, very simply, don't ask any questions. Just go it alone. Just, constantly cover up the fact that you don't know what you're doing. That's the way most people try to do it. And so that's why you'll notice these, and you can feel the vibration. You'll notice these very insecure 18, 19, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds. You know what I'm talking about? You meet these guys, they're all over the streets of Jerusalem because they're running wild here while they're studying at the mirror, and which, by the way, I think is good. It's very healthy for them. Think about the Amish. Not that we're here to learn from the Amish, but I think the Amish are they're those people. I don't know where they live, but they live somewhere in America, Pennsylvania, maybe. And they won't use any modern technology or whatever, and they're obviously very devout Christians. I think, is that the group that sends their kids out for a year? Or at least a year?
Something like that.
Yeah, they have to not be a Christian for a year. They have to move to the coffee shop neighborhood of Amsterdam for a year. And then they can come back to be part of the community. But I guess they figured out over the years that it makes for a healthier community. So these boys studying in Israel for the year or years, it might be quite healthy for them and really, really quite healthy for our communities that they ran wild for a year or two. And the reason is because you to live your life as a man, these boys, how long do they run wild? Till they get married. Meaning they get to meet the parents. It's arranged marriages, so the parents find a woman for them, and they meet them, and they get married. But the thing is he's a boy coming to Israel. When he gets married, he's called a man. And girls, when they're single, are called girls, and then when they get married, they become a woman. And you don't want boys married. You want men married. It's not good for society to have boys being, in charge of households and stuff like that. Men are in charge of households. Well, how do you become a man? Well, the way you become a man is a couple ways. One of them is courage. What is a man? A man is someone who faces danger with courage. Meaning when he feels fear, he checks the brakes just to get a feel for what he's getting into. But he's not pressing the brakes. He's checking the brakes. He's feathering the brakes. getting a glimpse of the world around him, how to navigate, and then he hits the gas, with courage into life and whatever's coming his way. Now, when you have a very protected society where every decision is made for you, i.e., the Haredi community of growing up as a teenager, where you literally don't make any decisions, including who you marry. So like the first free will exercise, the first real choice you made in your entire life was the day after Shavuot, because you don't make any of your own decisions during Shavuot either, which is the 7 days of festivities after the wedding. So now it's the 8th day after the wedding. They wake up, the couple wakes up, and they're sitting there, and he's like, what do you want to do? They got a whole day ahead of them, because they take a little time off to be together. What do you want to do? Which is, by the way, a sentence a man should never ask his wife. Don't ever ask your wife. Because you know what her real answer is? Nothing, if you're leaving it up to me. Because I want you to throw me on the back of your horse and ride me off into the sunset like a Western hero. But how many men take their wives out for dinner? She's sitting in the passenger seat, he's in the driver's seat. It looks like he's driving. He's not driving. How do you know if he's driving or not? By just what he says. If he says to her, where do you want to go? Her answer is, I want to go back in the house. Because I'm taking you out, you're taking me out. What does it mean to be taken out? What does it mean to be swept off your feet? And the answer is that there's a man in control. There's a man who's making me feel safe. There's a man who's taking me out to dinner. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with asking her, where she wants to eat. That's it. I'm just using this as an example. But the overarching theme is that the man is taking the family on the journey, and the wife is able to move into a full nurturing support role and not leadership. No woman wants to lead her family. There are times in the dynamism of a woman's system where leading is fine, but there's also times where it's going to be causing her to feel chaos and instability. And therefore, it's always the man's job to be leading the family forward. So in today's world where so many men have become feminized, and especially the more intellectual ones, and especially the more spiritual guys who are like highly developed in their feminine side, so they have to train themselves to be decisive. And the truth is a woman will be perfectly happy to follow you to dead end, the wrong place. She'll be happy. There's been a few times where I took my wife out to do whatever we had to do, or to eat, or whatever it was. And we arrived and the place was closed. And I looked at her and I said, wait a second, you knew it was going to be closed, didn't you? And she's like, yeah, I know. Then why didn't you say so? She said, I'd rather you lead me the wrong direction than me lead in the right direction. Yeah, I'd rather you lead me to the wrong place than me have to be leading the family or leading us. And that's just so important. And I'll give you a little hint for Shalom Bayis. This is going to sound a little strange, but get your wife drunk, and don't you drink a thing. You can, you can use, you'll drink ginger ale and she'll drink beer, or you'll drink grape juice and she'll drink wine, but she doesn't necessarily know you're drinking grape juice. Or you drink water and she's drinking vodka. Anyway, don't get her drunk, don't get her smashed that she's going to throw up or hurt herself. Anyway, but what you're doing is you're compromising her ability to control. Meaning to control things, control herself, to control anything. So you've compromised her abilities, and you've compromised. And by the way, you don't have to trick her. You can say, let's have a few drinks, You're going to drink alcohol, I'm not. But what you've done is you've allowed her to now go into her vulnerability. And you are a rock. You are a rock. And as her world's rocking, the only thing stable around there is you. And this is, and for many people, this is a game changer. The people who've tried this exercise, it's a game changer. And you can even be straight out about it. Like you can say, like, listen, I want to be a rock for you, and I'm going to be a rock for you. And I know I haven't been, and I'd like to do that as an exercise, is to, in a very safe environment, compromise your control and be a rock for you. And just be here in a way that's powerful and makes you safe in your most vulnerable state. Anyway, something worth trying. I know it sounds kind of unorthodox to be getting your wife drunk, but it's certainly permitted. And if she never drinks alcohol, it's a matter of literally one drink, because someone who has no tolerance for alcohol, which is someone who doesn't drink, it's a glass of wine. Anyway, women are supposed to be drinking wine, 4 cups of wine every Passover. So they're not supposed to be drinking grape juice. So I imagine that traditionally women did drink wine, because you can't just drink 4 cups of wine if you don't drink wine. You need to be a wine drinker to handle 4 cups of wine. But there's nowhere in halacha that permits a woman to drink grape juice if she's an able-bodied, normal human being. Obviously, people who are infirm can drink grape juice. Elderly, people like that. Or someone who's allergic to alcohol. And obviously, there's permission to alcoholics to drink grape juice if they're, if it can ruin their lives or something. Back to us is that we're talking about becoming a man, and if your whole life's controlled. I didn't finish my skit after the Shara Brachos. He says, "What do you want to do?" And she looks at him and says, "What do you want to do?" And he says, "Well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do?" It's like ping pong. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? And just to bring it down in principle, you can't become a person of powerful free will choice without lots of practice. It takes lots of practice. Well, how do you know you went the wrong way? By the pain in your nose for having slammed into a wall. There's wrong ways out there, plenty of them. And if you want to be a bad parent, protect your kids from bumping into the walls. And you want to ruin your kids, protect them. Now, obviously protecting them from serious harm. The way you do it is basically based on their age. You, as they get older, you release and release and release and release your protection. So like, how much protection does an infant need? On a scale of 1 to 10? 10. 10. 3-year-old, 9.8. 5-year-old, 9.5. An 8-year-old, 9.78. But as they're getting to be 10 years old, now they need like 8.5, and now they're bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. 7. Now they need a 7 protection. And now they're 15, 16. We're down to 5. Now they're 17. Now we're getting down to 3. And what's happening is, as you release it, they keep banging into stuff. They're just starting to hit stuff. And how do you know how much less to protect them as you go? To make sure they're hitting enough stuff that's not causing damage beyond the immediate damage, and obviously some boo-boos take days to heal. I'm not talking about physical boo-boos, it could be emotional boo-boos. But your protection is a protection that make sure they're getting hurt. If your kid ain't getting hurt, man. And this is how I raised my kids, very carefully like this. And boy, do they have good instincts. They just have great instincts. And I was so proud to see my oldest son with his baby, and his baby was on a chair. No one leaves babies that age on a chair, so everyone was like, quick! And so we were like jumping to like make sure the baby doesn't fall off the chair, and he stopped them. He said, no, this is where she's up to. And we were like, I was shocked. I couldn't breathe watching this kid on the chair. And he says, yeah, this is where she's up to. She's at the point now where she loses her balance. She's able to break her fall. And she does lose her balance, and I saw her fall. But he was right. She put out her hands and broke her fall. And was fine. She didn't hit her head. She didn't get hurt, nothing. And he trained her that way. I didn't even do that. I didn't do that. I didn't put my kids on a chair when they were still in Weebles. Weebles was an old toy when I was kids. It's called Weeble Wobble, but they don't fall down. Yeah, but they were like these weighted little things that wobble. They don't fall down. But my kid like upped me one. And the famous story I tell is when we were at it was actually this time of year we were on Benes Money, we went with a Hasidic family that were close to the park, a place called Gadi Yoshua outside Bnei Brak. And there's a lot of water there, and about 3 foot drop from the grass was the water. And it's just a pond, probably contaminated pond or whatever. And we each had toddlers, we each had 2-year-olds. And their toddler had to have 2 of their kids watching the toddler at all times, and our toddler was free to be, just following her siblings around and part of the game, and their toddler almost fell in the pond so many times, their toddler, because of a 3-foot drop into the pond, so they were just constantly like, they had to keep switching guards because they were getting exhausted. Following a 2-year-old who keeps almost falling into the pond is exhausting, so they kept switching. Meanwhile, my wife and I, we're not even facing the pond. We're like talking with our friends, this Hasidic couple who we kind of grew up with, and we're schmoozing with them the whole time. And finally, they brought their toddler up to us, and they're like, aren't you afraid your kid's gonna fall into the pond? And we're like, have you seen her ever once, like, even lose her balance a little next to the edge of the pond? And they're like, she's lost her balance a lot, but never next to the edge of the pond. She's good near the edge. And which is the same thing, for example, in mountain biking. I do hardcore off-road mountain biking. And I've gotten hurt mountain biking, never near the edge though. Meaning never doing something. Like, for example, the worst accident I ever had was when I broke my leg. It was when I was sitting on my bike, paying no attention. I wasn't paying any attention, I was sitting on my bike. And I don't know, I tipped over and somehow my bike got flown up to the top of the top tube and locked under the bar, which spun. And I think something spun my bar, so now my wheel was facing this way. So the bike just tipped right over. It rolled right over with the wheel facing this way. But somehow my leg flipped up on top of the bike. Handlebar clamped it, and then from my impact on my side, it just went clean break, tibia and fibula. It was horrific. What a disaster. If you saw the trail I was just coming down, you wouldn't go down it with ropes. I'm sorry, you wouldn't go down it without ropes. It's something that people go down using ropes to get down. And that's what I had just come down. That's not where you fall, you understand? That's where you're on, where every muscle in your body is locked in to the task at hand. And the same was with my daughter on the edge of the pond. Whenever she got near the edge of the pond, she would move into a different kind of mode, a more instinctual, self-protective mode. Anyway, so then I said, because some of their teenagers were there with us listening to us schmooze, so I said, there's enough things to be afraid of in this world. We don't have to put anything We don't have to add any fears into our kids. At which point, their 16-year-old Hasidic boy with these beautiful red pants, he looks up and he says, my parents put all of their fear into me. And he was like his eyes were tearing up. And then he says, I'm afraid of everything. And the mommy goes like this. It's very interesting that the mother and my wife spontaneously decided to run down a grassy hill. But it was like a steep grassy hill. And their mother, tripped and face planted so hard. I mean, like, bam, like total face plant. Meaning running down the hill was not a good idea for her. And falling without the instincts of how to fall. Her fall should have been, I mean, you have to decide. And the body decides for you, you don't have to know. Either you break your fall and get towards your feet again. You know, or you may fall, but you at least break your fall. Or, if you're really going over, you tuck and roll. Tuck and roll. It's the same thing in our mountain bikes, and we're going fast. You have to decide. If you're going over those bars, are you going to break your fall? Are you going to try to swing your feet out from under you so you can land on your feet? Are you going too fast to land on your feet, so that's just going to send you launching again? Are you going so far over that you can tuck and roll? Like, these aren't mental decisions. These are from practice of falling. Practice of banging into stuff. And the only way to build courageous people and safe people, people who will be safe, that'll have longevity because they have killer instincts to protect themselves for their own self-preservation. You gotta make sure when you raise children that there's a ratio of safety to non-safety. And do it smart so that they don't get hurt, meaning badly. And when it comes to boys, you really gotta toughen up your boys, which means hiking, camping, you know, creating any conditions that there's some level of survival. Because in my home, I raised them mountain biking, so if you can walk already, well, you're about ready to ride. So I get them a bike without pedals, you know, those push bikes. So later, they're a little bigger and get the pedal bike. And if they can already ride a pedal bike, well, who says you can't ride it off-road? You know, put them in the trails. So I bring my little guy to the trails. And, I mean, within months, they're really starting to learn how to ride off-road. And I'll never forget this one time. I've told this story a few times, so I apologize if there's a repeat for anyone, but one time we're on a pretty heavy thing, and I go down first, my next son comes down next son comes down next. And by the way, I have no problem riding with my girls, but they just never wanted to do this kind of riding, and we're doing technical downhill trails, really, really steep trails. So, and I'm obviously, because I got the little guy at the top, I'm not taking him down anything too crazy. But anyway, this one trail, I was like, I don't think he's gonna make it, but I did it anyway. I took a risk. And so I did it, next son did it, and we're at the bottom and we look up, and there he is, just like, head over heels, his bike's just like, he's all the way down. And he gets down to us, he's like crumpled on the floor, crumpled on the ground like a little potato, you know. By the way, I'm not in full face. And then it's back to the protection. It's calculated. Full face helmet, elbow pads that cover the forearms, full finger gloves, knee pads that cover the shins, hip pads, tailbone pad. You understand that he's bubble wrapped. Anyway, I picked the little guy up. I prop him up on a little rock that I found where we're sitting together, and he's on my lap. I propped him up on my lap, and he is like, he's just like, Kind of like, the post-crying, when he finally comes back to himself and he can actually breathe. Oh, he had the wind knocked out of him. The first hit already lost all the wind. I don't know what it is about little kids, but as soon as they hit their torso. But he also has shoulder pads and chest pad. But anyway, but as soon as the wind got knocked out, first hit, just like, so he's half unconscious while taking his, 40-foot beating down the mountain, Anyway, when he finally gets his breath back, I point to the top of the mountain and I say to him, back to the top. And he just looks at me with tears in his eyes. And he's like, no. And I'm like, you got one way out of this forest, kid. And that's down the trail. But you're not continuing down the trail. If you don't get back up there, I'll carry your bike. I'll bring your bike up. But you're getting down there on your bike. And let me point out a few ways of getting down so that you can actually make it. And I point out what he needs to do and where he needs to get off the brakes and where he needs to be on the brakes. Obviously, when you're hitting an obstacle, you do not want to touch your front brake. That's going to send you exactly what happened to him over the bar. On the other hand, your back brake, you press it too tight, it starts to slide and fishtail. So you need to feather the back brake. It'll slow you down, but it won't stop you. The only thing that will stop you down a mountain is your front brake. That's all your braking is front brake, but you gotta realize that your front brake's your ticket to going over the bars too if you press it too hard. Back brake, press it too hard, you're fishtailing, lost control. Anyway, I showed him where to go exactly, and he nails it. He nails it. He just comes out and the feeling in his heart of victory. And the get back up there type of, the get back on the horse. Ruggedness, I don't know what the right word for it, courage to get back up. This is how all my kids were trained. This is between you and the mountain, and the mountain's not going to win. You're going to leave this having won. This is why I'm saying that the boys who come to study in Jerusalem who are running wild in the streets, I'll be coming back late at night from something, kumsitz or something, or some family hired me to this big Hasidic family wants me to take the family on the journey, which is such a beautiful thing. This is one in a million families, but there are these, the giant Hasidic families with, 10 kids or 14 kids or 8 kids, whatever. And now they got all these marrieds and now they got all these little grandkids and stuff. They will have me come over fairly late when all the toddlers are asleep and all the babies are asleep, and make sure all the sons-in-laws and daughter-in-laws are there. And I've come with candles and sage and my guitar and take them on a total journey together. Even though the journey is more about the individual, I can't tell you how connected it is for the whole family to experience such a thing. And even last night, I drove out to Beit Shemesh to one of these Hasidic families. And it was so beautiful. And at the very last part of the meditation, I had everyone hold hands. In a meditation, and these are closest family members, but holding hands with your eyes closed, while I spoke about connectivity and family and how important it is, and then I gave the mommy a chance to just share her love. And she spoke so beautifully. She was like, and I just want each child to know that I don't even care who you are, what you do, or what's going on. I love you unconditionally. And the father got to speak as well and speak like that. Just those words alone were, to hear that from your parents, that you love unconditionally. And there was this beautiful Hasidic family. It was just every kid just was gorgeous, long pace. And these Hasidic women on this side, and Hasidic men on this side, and all the way down to their 14 14-year-old boy, and I've done it for families where it's little kids too, like 5, 6-year-olds who are mature enough to be in there. Anyway, those kids come to learn here. I'll come home late at night from such an event, like last night, and I see these mirror guys in like t-shirt with the sits over. It's 3 in the morning. They're like coming up from the park, Gun Soccer, the biggest park in town, and just you can see there's a swagger in their walk that wasn't there when they arrived. And swagger's a word that nobody knows, but if you ever heard the word swagger. But they develop a swagger, they develop a confidence, having bumped into enough stuff over their year here, or 2 years here, 3 years here. That guy's a man. He's become a man. Men have a swagger. There's a way they walk, there's a demeanor that they have. And that's exactly what a woman needs when she gets married. She doesn't need a sheep. She needs a wolf. And but back to our discussion about the last thing is just how do you know the path you're on is right. So we talked about arguments being right. We talked about making decisions. But then there's the path you're on. How do you know you're walking the right path? There's different ways to know. One of the ways to know is the path you're on for children and senior citizens. If you're listening to this class and you or someone you love is on a path that is not at all something little kids could do and nothing senior citizens would be interested in, get off that path. So like, for example, today in our generation, so when I grew up, it was hippies. I grew up in I was born in the late 60s, grew up in the 70s. And the culture that I was more attracted to was the hippie culture. But it always bothered me. Where are the little kid hippies, besides me? Where are the little kid hippies? And where are the senior citizen hippies? They don't exist. Because all the hippies, when they turned 40, became yuppies. And little kids don't get the philosophical underpinnings of hippiehood. Today, it's, like just today I went into an Apple store. Not that Israel has Apple stores. By the way, I don't know if this is true, and I hope I don't get flagged for this. But could it be that Apple is anti-Israel? Do you ever think about that? We have no Apple store, we have no Apple factories, we have no Apple tech in Israel.
Their iPhones, can I get my blue bag?
Yeah.
Their iPhones, they make them in Chinese factories because of cheaper labor. You don't have iPhone factories.
I wasn't discussing really so much the factories. I was talking about more the tech. You ever thought about that? Where's the Apple store? There is no Apple store. What it really makes me think about it is when I'm dictating to Siri and I say the word Israeli, and it spells it with a Z. And I'm like, not a word. And Israeli is a word, and the whole world knows that word, and every AI knows that word. And why does it come up with a Z? It stopped lately. I don't know if people noticed and complained, but it's really weird.
But at the same
time, no one ever thinks about this. All the other tech companies have major things going on with Israel.
It's more complicated than that because on an iPhone you can set up, if you have iPhone any of English, it will say like January 1 and then 11 Tevet. So there's certain things they do or don't accommodate. It only takes one person in a company to be anti-Semitic to just get that little thing to censor that aspect of it. But at the same time, there can be 20 people above him that are more pro-Jewish or
Yeah, I'm only talking about the top here. Anyway, but it could be Apple has some issue with Israel. And the, how did I get onto Apple?
Apple Store. We're going to get something fixed today.
Oh yeah, so you have to use these triple the price. People who probably mail order it, and the store's probably illegal, and they're not paying taxes on their imports. But who knows what these stores are? But when I went in there, the lady she had pink hair, and I was going to introduce her to my son in New York on video because I needed a piece and like they could talk. She didn't want to be filmed. And I was like, it's not film. But anyway, but she had that xenophobic aspect to her as well, which is, or agoraphobic, I forget what the xenophobic. What's the term? Xenophobic.
What's the context? Afraid of people who are different? Or afraid of being watched, or?
Who knows? I can't remember. Anyway, that whole woke society, we're the little woke kids. And we're the woke elderly. I mean, there are such things as woke elderly, but only in politics, I think. Only if you're you have to be an elected official to be a woke senior citizen. My point is that it should cover all, whatever path you're on, should be a path for all ages. Because for it to be a true path, it has to be true for humanity. So I think that's one thing to watch for. To be able to be rebuked is important. People should feel comfortable telling you you're on the wrong path. So if you've set up your personality to be such that it vibrationally repels a person who might correct your path, meaning if you've become less open to hear about your path, so you're probably on the wrong path. I wouldn't trust yourself too much about the right path. If your algorithms online are like reaffirming your path, and you find you can't watch a YouTube video opposing your path, you're probably on the wrong path. Like the path you take should be, opposition proof. You should have what to answer for your path if there are people opposing it. Your path should be a path that's been walked on many times. Like to know you're on the right path, it should be a well-walked path. I mean, the arrogance of thinking you're going to create a new path after, I don't know what modern history says the history is, but I guess they probably say it's somewhere around 5,000-6,000 years. Meaning, I don't know if you guys know, this is kind of interesting that human history is only as old as the Torah says. It's just such an interesting thing. I mean, they found fossils of Homo sapiens that would date back, but for some reason, the only actual history we have of human beings, the way we know them, is exactly as the Torah says. Have you thought about that? I had sitting next to me once on an ML flight, the head of anthropology at Hebrew University in Mount Scopus. She was my next door neighbor there, so I fall asleep very quickly, so I had to ask her a few questions quickly before I fall asleep. One of my questions to her was, can you think on this whole globe, if there's a technological building built by human beings that dates back earlier than 6,000 years? What I mean by that is it's a structure that, like a two-story type thing, like something that would be like, you need some engineering for it. You understand the question? Like, is there a structure that would require some engineering the way a human being today would recognize as engineering? And she sat there quietly for a second. She was kind of combing the globe in her studies, and she looks at me and she says, no, doesn't exist. And I was like, that's crazy. I only thought of it on the spot, this question. And she said, you know, it is crazy. Here I am, head of anthropology, and there's no real technological engineering until post-Torah. When the Torah says the world came.
Post Adam Harishon.
Post-Adam. Yeah, the first man as we know man. And it's really interesting. And that's kind of human history. So, why am I talking about this, about the right path? Oh, is that if you think you're going to create a new path, how do you know your path's wrong? The fact that it's new and unwalked. No one's tramping down this path. Now, I know some people say, like, hey, I want to be like the first one to walk down the path. I want it to be my path. Well, I got good news for you. First of all, that's your ego, but I got good news for you. When you walk down a path, you guys ever been hiking? A rugged, beautiful hiking trail? Is it old or new if you've never walked it? It's an interesting question, right?
Old.
It's old. And while you're walking down it, is it old or new?
For you, it's new. It's old.
Yeah, 100% new. You've never been on this trail. You're walking down that trail. So I'm going to finish with a song. And it's a song written by Yisrael Dagan, if I'm correct in that. And the words are Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And the words are, Tunu li et libchem, give me your hearts, and I will lead you on a new path. A path that was already walked on by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But nevertheless, it's a new path. Got it? תנו לי את ליבכם, ואני אדריך אתכם בדרך חדשה, שכבר הלכו בה אבותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב. ואף על פי כן, היא דרך חדשה. ואף על פי כן, היא דרך חדשה. תנו לי את ליבכם, ואני אדריך אתכם בדרך חדשה, שכבר הלכו בה אבותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב. ואף על פי כן, היא דרך חדשה. ואף על פי כן, היא דרך חדשה. Try it with me, together. תנו לי את ליבכם, ואני אדריך אתכם בדרך חדשה, שכבר הלכו בה אבותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב. ואף על פי כן, היא דרך חדשה. ואף על פי כן, היא דרך חדשה. Give me your hearts and I will lead you on a path. That is new. That was already walked on by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But nevertheless, it's a new path.